So I won't be able to film anything from the bottom side because I'll be in the way, but I'll try and set up the camera to show from the top side for installing the turbo and whatnot. And I'll look up the specs for the torque for the nuts. I got somewhere here, I got brand new copper nuts for the manifold, as well as a few extras here somewhere for these ones here that hold the shield on the one end. And I gotta still get this, I forgot about this, I gotta get this nut off of here because we need this bracket which supports the turbo feed line. We gotta put it on the new one here. And otherwise I think the new turbo should, we gotta pull this apart, get all that goop off there. He just sealed it all up so it wasn't getting full of dirt until it was installed. We need to put the E-clip on this still. I'll just use the one from this one since I'm not gonna bother putting it back together. And then there's a special adapter that has to go in here because that size is a lot bigger than that. So that's the different style of turbo that it is here. I believe it's so that's saying, it's upside down, but that's saying GT 1749 VA. Hear it. So I think, I mean, I don't have all the details on it yet, but I believe it's basically the same turbo. It's just updated a little bit from what was on the car. I don't think it's actually any bigger as far as the actual turbine size. Just for some reason, this fitting that's going, see if I can get the direction right here now. That should be going, don't quote me, that should be going to the intake of the car, I think. Anyway, don't quote me on that, but that size on the main body of the turbo, I believe, is the same. This bigger one here needs an adapter, which I did get with it as well. So hopefully the hose is, the hose angle is quite different. Now, whether that's because he assembled it in the wrong orientation, so we might have more trouble here than I think we are going to. So we'll have to see how fun that's going to be. But yeah, that's not, they're sitting in the same position right now, and that is not that. So this is going to be interesting. I'll have to work through that a bit and figure out. I did get another pipe from him, but I don't know how or where it would help this issue. So anyway, that's what you get when you got a little bit different turbo than what's supposed to be on it. I think he assembled it. I think he assembled it in the wrong position, because this, yeah, he's got it assembled a quarter turn out, because that post and this post are off center, and these ones, it's over here. So this is supposed to be over here. So that's fun. I might have to change that, unfortunately, which could be a challenge. So I better do that before it goes in the car, because that's going to be a nightmare to try and do once it's mounted to the engine. So I will get all that figured out, and then we'll do a little update before we slap it on. Okay, so crisis averted. I had forgotten about this extra pipe that he gave me with the turbo, because that's what it was before. This is just turned a bit. That goes onto there, and then that's the pipe that goes over to the intercooler. So to accommodate for this being in a different spot, we've got this pipe, which is going to go like this, like that, to get us from where the spigot now is on the new turbo, from where the old one was, to the same place over here. So we're okay for that. I don't think we need this after all, because there's already one in there. We would need this if we were going to use the old hose, because that's the size for that. So I'll carry on with getting I gotta get that extra feed line bracket off, get all the tape and everything off of this one, get that goo off the cooler flange there. And I got one stud that came out of the block, so I'm gonna take that nut off, get the stud put back in the block, and then we should be ready to stick it on the car, I hope. Alright, so I think the time has finally come to actually install the turbo on the car. I went along and used the threading die on all the studs there to make sure they were good. I put the one stud in that had came out with the nut. All the ports are clean on the intake as best I can, and I've got the new gaskets there for the exhaust manifold. So I'm going to put those gaskets on and we'll anti-seize all of the studs, and then you got to grab the turbo, of course, and then grab all of those shoulder washers from the old nuts, put those guys on with new copper nuts, and the torque for the turbo nuts, which is 5, and I gotta remember this shield piece too, which I didn't remember where it came from originally. That shield piece has to go on the passenger side underneath. So number 5, that's not right. Let's try that again. Oh. So I guess they're just saying that covers both. That's weird. That is a nut. And that says 5, which is somehow the same as the intake bolt 5. But anyways, 18 foot-pounds. So that's our 216 inch-pounds, I believe. So all of the copper nuts that hold the manifold on are 18 foot-pounds, and that's enough to crush those gaskets a little bit and make a seal. So we'll do all that, get the turbo on there, and then we got to put the return line on, which is where that shop towel is down there. I got a nice brand new turbo return line here. That looks like it's actually even original Volkswagen, which is amazing. One of those guys, and gasket for it to the turbo. Put that on first, and then we got to fill the turbo with the rebuild additive oil here. The idea being, when you first start up the car with the new turbo on it, it's not going to have oil pressure to it right away. So we'll put that in the turbo first before we put the pressure line on the top. And I've got the union in there and torqued, and I even put a little bit of Loctite on it. And I'm going to make sure that all of this, the threads and even the cone a little bit, are all anti-seized, so that if I ever have to take the and the back side of the tube as well, if I ever have to take the turbo feed line off, I'd like to be able to get it apart without destroying the line like every other one I've done so far. So that's the plan. Yeah, turbo on and torqued, then the oil return line can go on, and then we can fill the turbo with that additive, and then we'll get the pressure line installed, and then probably try and get the lower piping on at least, and then we're up to intake manifold, I think, and then actually maybe before that the exhaust cooler, just so it's not so hard to fight the hoses in there. But we're making progress little bit by little bit, so let's get to it. Alright, so last minute sanity check here before we go ahead and torque these, because once they're torqued, it's game over for the gaskets. So we do have 4 gaskets on, we anti-seized all the studs, we've got all 8 spacers on, we've got all 8 new copper nuts. The mounting tab on the bottom of the turbo that goes to the block. The hole's not quite lined up, and I think that's just because the guy that rebuilt it didn't put the bracket on in exactly the right place. So hopefully I can just kind of pry it sideways a little bit with a bar once the turbo is torqued to be able to get that bolt in. Otherwise I might have to try and loosen that bolt on the bottom, which won't be too fun, but should still be doable. I remembered the little shield guide that's supposed to be on there for the right hand side of the turbo. I think we should be in good shape to go ahead and torque these up, I hope. Can't think of anything else. We should be able to access the intake fasteners no problem and put the new gasket on there. Yeah, I can't think of anything else. Oh, what I meant to do before we really got it in there was to take pictures of all the numbers and markings on the turbo, so I'll do that. And then we should be good to go ahead and torque, and all I'm gonna do is start in the middle and work my way out. Actually, probably more so like this way, and then further out. There's only 8 of them, but start in the middle, work your way out, all to the same torque. I'm gonna do probably just 2 steps. I'll go somewhere around 9 foot-pounds, and then I'll do the 18 foot-pounds, and I'll do probably a double click on all of them at the end. And then that will be the manifold secured back to the engine. I can fix up the turbo feed line support bracket there after that. It's in the way to torque that one nut, which is weird. I don't remember that from before, but no matter. So I'm gonna take those pictures quick so I've got all the turbo info documented, and then we'll carry on with getting it torqued up. So that has the turbo installed and all of the nuts torqued up and the gaskets squished like they're supposed to. So now I'm going to go underneath and try and fight that bolt in for the lower bracket. This diagram is not right at all, but it's that bolt there, goes through the lower bracket into the block, which is 30 foot-pounds, number 18. So I'll do that guy up with torque wrench to 30 with some anti-seize on it. And then as well, while I'm down there, I'll put the new turbo return line on. This is also not correct. It's not a Banjo. This is the right engine, isn't it? Oh, maybe not. Oh no, okay, turbocharger assembly, 1.9 engine, and there's only 1.9, okay. Only 1.9. All right, so yeah, this is not right. I don't know what's up with that. Ours does have that flange and the gasket and the 2 bolts. So 17, those guys are 11 foot-pounds. So we'll just do 132 inch-pounds on those guys. And then this, yeah, is not a Banjo. It's a flare nut. That guy right there. So there's no way to torque that. I'm just gonna put whatever I can on it. If you go too far, you risk, you know, collapsing this flared end here, or like splitting the nut perhaps. I don't think it would hurt the block really, but definitely not a Banjo like it's saying. There's the gasket for the flange to go to the turbo. So yeah, I'm gonna go under there, try and get that guy in. I gotta pry the bracket a little bit, torque that up to 30, and then get the return line going with the new gasket, anti-seize on the cap screws. And actually I might have to find some better cap screws, but get that up to the turbo and torqued to 11 each for number 17 there. And then we don't have that. We're just gonna put the flare into the block, and I'll tighten that nut up. I'm gonna also anti-seize. I should have shown while I was over here. And it's actually a good example for the pressure line as well. I'm going to anti-seize a little bit on the cone, not too much because you don't want it going inside. But the biggest thing is to anti-seize the pipe under where the nut's going to be. If the nut seizes to the pipe, that's when you twist the pipe off you know, and then you're gonna have a bad time. More so with the pressure line here than with the return line. This being the big one, especially, of course now I can't see it, especially since, hello, this is a used line. It's in really good shape, but it is used, so there is some rust. I don't know why I can't get it to focus. Hello, there we go, maybe. Yoo-hoo. Anyway, there we go. It's gonna be a bit rusty behind there, and if you're putting a used line back on, even more so. So I wanna make sure that's going to be, oops, as good a chance as possible of getting it apart the next time without destroying the line. I don't wanna have to put a $120 pressure line on just for fun. So anyways, that's the plan. No point in me trying to film it. Really can't get a camera angle that's worth showing. So those are the next few steps to get the bottom end wrapped up. And then once that return line is on, then we can do the filling of the turbo and then fight the pressure line on into place. And then start hooking up pipes. All right, so bottom bracket bolt is in and torqued, and we've got the return line on. I don't think I can, maybe I can do this. Maybe. Somewhere there. Return line is on. Torqued at the top and tightened at the bottom with the flare. So now we're gonna fill the turbo through the union there with that tube of break-in oil that I showed before. Get that in there, and then we'll get the pressure feed line on. And then that pretty much wraps up the function of the turbo, other than we have to put all of the, I'm fighting the mosquitoes here, have to put all the ducting piping back on. But after I get the oil in and the feed line on, we're going to switch over and get the intake manifold mounted and get the exhaust cooler back together and on there so we can fill the coolant and give it overnight and part of tomorrow to bubble down, so we don't have to worry about any overheating issues when we go to start it. Get the intake manifold on, get the exhaust cooler back on. We can put the pipes for the cooler back on there. And then I'll probably go, once we get the, I mean, that'll be, probably won't even get all that done tonight, but we'll try and get to that point to get the coolant in it so that the coolant is bubbling down like I mentioned. And then we'll probably go back down below, get the intercooler pipe that runs up to the intercooler here, get that one installed. And I gotta figure out a new mounting point for it because the stud twisted off instead of the nut undoing like it should have earlier. And get the intake pipes reconnected. And then bottom side, the axle shaft can go back on. The CV shield, the downpipe for the exhaust with the new gasket and new nuts. And then anywhere in there after the intake's on, the valve cover can go back on too. And the vacuum pump, we'll get some RTV on there. And then we're getting really close. Throw some stuff back together for intake piping and airbox and whatnot. And then once it's ready to be run, then we can get it going, get it up to temperature, and then set the injection timing. And then, oh, I still got to put back together the, why does this not fit now? I still got to put back together the passenger ball joint, and I got to install both outer tie rod ends still. And then, yeah, we'll be getting kind of close to being ready to roll it out of here, I hope. Oops. Camera. All right, so I'm just gonna time lapse me filling the oil here and fighting the pressure line into position. Nothing really to see. The torque for the banjo that's on the oil filter housing is 26 foot-pounds on the banjo, on the oil filter end of the pressure line, and the other end of it is the flare. So again, it's just whatever you can put on it. And I'm going to be so pleased to be able to do it right here and not have to be doing it from below, not being able to see what you're actually doing, to know if you're straight or if it's cross-threaded or if you're twisting something off. So it's going to be a luxury. Anyway, we'll lapse through some of this stuff here, and I'll cut back to live if there's something specific to mention. All right, after considerable dicking around, as my favorite line goes, I was only able to get part of the turbo, you can't see that at all, of course, of the turbo pre-fill tube in there. I don't know what the problem is. It won't go into the turbo, and I can't make any air bubbles come out of it. So I put as much in as I could get, and we'll do what the rebuilder suggested, and before we go to start it, we will pull the fuse for the injection pump, or however we can disable it, and then crank the car for maybe 30 seconds to try and get oil to the turbo before we actually start it and have it spinning at several thousand RPM, even at idle. So it's got some in it at least. I'm not happy with the quantity, maybe you would say, but it's not empty, at least it's not dry. So there shouldn't be any issues with excessive wear for getting it going, but we will try and prime it as well. So I'm now going to fight, of course I'm in the dark here now because I don't have any real lights out here. I'm going to fight the feed line into position and get it done up to the union there, and get it torqued to the banjo on the front so that that part is done and sealed, and then we can move on. Alright, so I know you guys can't see much anything that's going on here. I can barely see because there's no real lighting out here. But we've got the pressure line is on. I tightened up the down there the flare nut with a wrench as best I could. And then I just torqued the banjo bolt, which is down somewhere over there in darkness, of course, as per usual, down there, 26 foot-pounds. And then there's a clamp for that pressure line down there, and another one here. Those little guys are 7 foot-pounds. And then I finished up that copper nut there for the mounting bracket as I get eaten by mosquitoes. And these two nuts here for the heat shield, those are 18 foot-pounds, same as the rest of the copper nuts were. So that is the oil system for the turbo wrapped up. Pressure and return is done. So I think the next step is to get the intake manifold installed. I've got a new gasket for it. The surface is already good to go. It's those bolts there, and they, I believe, are the same torque as everything else. Oops. number 5, which is still 18 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna get I've got a clean intake. I did find one here, one that's already it's got some residue from the cleaning chemical, and I think I'll just do a quick brush and rinse, but it's been cleaned of carbon anyways. And I've got a new gasket for that, and we'll anti-seize all the bolts, get them on, torque them up, and then we can start to put some of the piping back together. I'm thinking maybe I'll hold up the intake and see how much clearance there's going to be. If it's going to be close on clearance, then I will, get the exhaust cooler connected to the hoses again at least, because it's going to be awfully hard to do that if there's no space to work. So we'll see how that goes here. So something to make note of for the intake gasket here. I don't know if the camera's going to be able to pick it up, but there is a bead roll. It's going to focus on the part that I need it to. Focus. There's a bead roll around each port. The side that has the bead extrusion, which in this case is this side. The manual says the beaded side faces the intake manifold. So this side that has the extruded bead goes away from the block. And it's got to go, it does go this way. So the bar along the top to fit the intake like this, and make sure you've got that bead extrusion facing the intake manifold. So that's the way it goes together. Well, as per typical, this isn't going to cooperate because it's Volkswagen, and why would it? So I barely have maybe maybe half the coolant in. Of course, this is way over full right now because it won't bubble down into the system. So that's going to be a pain in the butt as per normal, but I'll leave it sit overnight just like this. Put the cap back on the top, and hopefully when I come back to it in the morning, it will be down a long way from where it is right now. Otherwise, we're going to have to get creative like I do with Mark IIs to be able to get the thing to fill without having an airlock, and then you don't get any coolant to the thermostat and it overheats things. Anyway, we got to where I was finally hoping to, though. The exhaust cooler is at least mounted to the intake. The intake is all torqued now and finished. The exhaust cooler is mounted loosely to the intake to get it in the right place, so I can put the hoses on and clamp them. just so that I knew the orientation was correct and so that I could clamp them so we don't have any coolant leaks, although there's no pressure at this point. But that's it for tonight. We'll leave the coolant sit to hopefully bubble down, and then go at wrapping up the rest of the piping and whatnot in the morning.